has started, so everyone be in your best behavior. So we were going to do economy design today, and we're going to mess around in class with economies and try to essentially make a mini economy. What I was gonna do is have y'all compete against each other with like real life virtual currency, if that makes sense. And the winner would be the one who created the most currency at the end of the class. Now, of course, that can't happen. Um, I've actually tried to find an online kind of like system that simulates that, and there are a few, but they're unbelievably complicated. So instead, what I'll have at the end of today, I'll show you a little game called Slipways, um, which kind of simulates economy management and is in itself an economy simulator, but it's a very simple economy simulator. Doesn't have any kind of like free to play crap or any kind of like cheats or tweaks. It just is a pure engine, I suppose, that runs an economy. But I'll show you that later. So the reason why we cover economy design is we kind of want to include some method, some part of economy design in our games. Now, a lot of people, when they hear economy design, immediately think of free to play, and they immediately think about grifting players or trying to trick them into spending the most money in your store. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, that is a reality of some parts of our game industry. However, one thing you can take from economy design is the fact that you can design economies themselves, and more importantly, we can incentivize specific player behavior by creating in-game rewards, so in-game progression points, as well as in-game currency, because collection has been around since, like, literally Mario has collection. Even in Pong, there is points collection. So there has always been like a numerical number set to something that's achievable, and it's always compared against other players or the in-game world, and it is important, even in a single-player game, even if you're not doing anything like free-to-play, or if you're doing premium or freemium or whatever method you're using. So this is the basic of economy design. So like it is essentially just incentive design. Economies are designed to create a currency trading system within the game for the purposes of trading goods and currency, but that's not the main reason why we have it. The main reason why we have it is we want to drive more players and we want to keep players engaged. So one at a time, if I could get like between the differences between these, can anyone see first of all what is uncommon across these games? What are the differences between the types of games of MMO, MOBAs, multiplayer FPS, say auto battlers, tower defense? What are each of these different games trying to incentivize using economy? And if you think back to whenever you've played one of these games, when have you been rewarded with in-game currency or in-game goods?
Continuously playing the game.
There's
It,
so that's a commonality. I was going to go commonalities later, but
uh,
absolutely, like there, if you want to start with commonalities, we can. So commonality number one is straight up just engagement with the game. Some games are completely unabashed about it. Stuff like free to play games are, oh, you logged in again. You didn't log in for a week. Here's a bit of money. Now, we'll
mm,
talk about that later, why that's very important, especially for free to play games, or even if you're not free to play, if you're doing a mobile game. There's a term called retention, which is extremely important for metrics. So, retention relates to um, on day one, I have 20,000 players playing my game, only 100 of them stayed. So, that is an absolutely terrible retention rate. So, you want to
mm,
see what the retention rates are after a day, after a week, after a month. So it's like hour, day, week, month, and how many players still keep playing your game after that time. So incentivization of continuous playing is very important for that. Now the same exact thing happens with non-free to play games, so premium games. Even on Steam, when you log into a game and you start playing any single player game, you'll often find you get rewarded quite quickly. Even in something as simple as like a little platformer, you'll get a little bonus or you unlock something. Um, you might see a shop that you can't afford certain things in yet. Cuphead does that very well. If anyone's played Cuphead, when you finish, I think level 2 or level 1 or level 2, you see a shop and you can't afford half of the items in it, but you have been given enough money to buy one thing. So now we've given you currency, we've dragged you to the game. You are now invested because you can see all the other future goals you can get to, but you're only able to get one of the earlier goals. But you know now the procedure to get more money to get the further goals. So in general, we are essentially driving engagement is a huge thing. Um, Within each genre itself, there'll be slightly different incentives. So, for example, mobile players may want to incentivize teamwork. So if you get a good rating, often you'll get a reward, sometimes in the form of a loot box that may contain currency or may contain goods in the game. Um, if you're in a multiplayer FPS, they might want to incentivize twitch shooting. So like if you have a higher accuracy rate, you may get higher drops of currency, etc., etc. So often this economy is designed as a way to kind of reward players for playing the game well in the way that you've designed it. So if you remember this kind of gaming motivation model, and that came from the Quantic Foundry motivation model, um, this will basically give you an idea. If you know what your player base is aimed towards, you are then going to gear your economy to incentivizing, in this case, for example, a bit of mastery, a bit of achievement, a bit of creativity. So imagine that this is your perfect target player. This means your economy is designed around building for this. Can anyone give me an example of like when I would reward someone in this kind of game? If I'm aiming for mastery, achievement, and a little bit of creativity, when would they
Maybe
get
getting
money? Say again?
a max score on a level or something like that.
So that would hit achievement. It probably indirectly would hit mastery as well, because in order to get a max score in the level, you probably need to master some of the skills.
You could give them a cosmetic item that can only be unlocked once you get to a certain level.
Yeah, cosmetics are important with these things. You would also have to remember to link the cosmetic to a numeric number. So let's say you have, if you're dropping 100 gold every time you complete the level at a mastery level that we'll call great. So every time you do great, you get 100 gold. Now we also want to link that 100 gold to the cosmetic. So if I have a cosmetic and it's worth 500, I know that cosmetic's super rare, it's very expensive, and it's something that I can use as a proud achievement. I can show off to my friends. I can tell people I've unlocked that thing, because everyone who's played that game now knows if I have that item is worth 5 great passes of that level. Now, it could be that I grinded and it took me like 100 goes at the level and I only scored mediocre at each time. It doesn't really matter. It's more a kind of representation of the amount of effort. And that's the way I think people should be thinking about economies. Whether or not you give a crap about trying to monetize your game or get money from people, or even if you're just trying to make a premium game, the currency in general is always a representation of skill and effort. So I would think about it in that sense. So you reward whenever they do something that's skillful or, took a lot of work. The other thing that's often done in games is they'll do a multiple currency or resource model. So first of all, especially in free to play games, we especially see this. It's they'll devolve money away from the gems, and they'll do it in a huge number, so people can't keep track of it. Because we're very good at keeping track of small numbers, between one to about 100. We're pretty good at keeping track of those. But when you start telling me a euro is worth 20,000 coins, now my brain is kind of broken a bit. And then when you start going, the 20,000 coins is worth 3 gems, and some items are worth 2 gems and 5,000 coins. I don't know about you, but I'm lost. I now have no idea. Like, if I tell you an item is worth 5 gems and 2,000 coins, how much is that worth in real money? Freaking no one knows. I don't know. It's obviously a fraction of the euro, but we don't know how much of the fraction it is. And this is very much, it's kind of a shady practice. I don't really back it. but it is used in order to remove the association between real world money and in-game currency. Basically allowing players to play more, and a lot of games do it. Even stuff like Overwatch, which is not free to play, even though it's a premium game. You can gain loot boxes yourself very easily, or you can purchase them, but the purchasing is not tied to a direct currency limit. So you just get loot boxes which may have currency in them. So this as they kind of keep a few steps in between the money and what actually is the in-game currency. Anyone know why they will put in multiple currency types? Why would there be gems? And this is a Clash of Clans example. Why would there be gems as well as gold? Why not just everything tied to gold?
To increase the build rate or increase the speed at which you can achieve things.
What do you mean?
Because with Clash of Clans,
Well,
build, you can make buildings, but they have a limited
No, no,
time
no. Sorry.
for the buildings
The
made.
question is, I don't really care what they do in game. I guess
Oh, right,
is the
okay.
question.
because the one gem could be in-game currency, while the gold could be um, pay real money to get gold to get things, extra items or whatever.
So the
That
real
could be easier to get.
that is that could be a method, but the real method that most people will use multiple currency types for is basically to slow player growth. So if I tell you that 1,000 gold can buy you a house, and then 10,000 gold can buy you a castle, and 100,000 gold can buy you a city. You can see how it gets out of control really fast, where you'll get loads of players being able to buy tons and tons of cities, because at a certain point you always need to keep leveling up the amount of gold that players get, so at a certain point it'll get huge. Now you can try to control that by making the by tweaking the costs, but the very easy way to do it is to require two types of currencies. So you'll say, okay, a house would be 1,000. 10,000 is a castle, but you also need 5 gems. And then 100,000 will be a city, but you also need 2,000 gems. So what happens now is now you have it multiple delays. I might be able to generate, because most of these types of games which have currency, you're either collecting or generating money. I might be able to generate 1,000,000 gold really quickly, but the gems may be the finite resource, which, like, for example, might be based off rarity. So there's nothing I can really do to generate that, but I still need that resource in order to build the higher level items. So you often see that as a way of controlling the economy and making sure there's no runaway people. So you don't have a player who has billions of dollars, which is what happens in real life, basically. There's no way any of us are going to be taking over Jeff Bezos' company, because we just aren't able to. So you kind of don't want that same situation to happen in your in-game economy. So you gate it with a second resource, and sometimes even third resources or fourth resources. And then finally, the last thing is, like, goods must expire. Things have to basically disappear. Any reason why? Anyone know?
Hoarding.
Exactly. Like, we do not want hoarding. We don't want the same exact situation. So, like, it weirdly, even in pay to win games, it's still kind of anti-capitalist in the sense that designers do not want to encourage hoarding. It breaks your economy. If anyone knows about the diamond situation in real life, basically diamonds are very expensive because a number of companies, including the De Beers company, hoards diamonds, and the scarcity is what makes the actual diamonds expensive. At any one time, they could flood the market and completely crash the value of diamonds, but they don't. They keep it artificially high by creating artificial scarcity in order to make more money. You do not want the same situation to happen in your game, because you may design, for example, a gem to be worth 1,000 gold, but if people start hoarding gems and never using them and they don't expire, now you get the situation where a gem starts becoming worth 20,000 gold, 50,000 gold, 100,000 gold, because the value will then be able to be set by the people who can hoard it, and they can keep hoarding all the gems, selling a few of those to make loads of cash, buying more gems or generating more gems, and now you have someone who has stranglehold on your economy. And this is especially important for multiplayer games. So this is just another example of how can anyone tell me how much the full rage chili is even worth?
Like €7.
7? So if you look at that, now you will get in-game coins as well. And again, this is how they kind of disassociate with it. £7 is huge. This is a mobile game. I'm not sure about the £7, but I haven't calculated it myself. But if it is, it does look like it's 15 gold for like 99 cents. So 125 is loads. You do generate in-game gold, but that's how they do it. So you don't realize how much you're spending because you're like, oh, well, I already have 70 up here. I just need to purchase a little bit more. And plus, if you look at the difference in price, this is 3 times more money, real life money, but you're getting 4 times more in-game currency. So again, this calculation makes it so difficult. It's like when you go to the cinema and they're like the medium popcorn deal is €5, but if you put in another 80 cents, you get the large one. It breaks your brain because you can't really relate to it. It's not a linear curve. The change in currency is completely different, so it's very difficult to calculate what this actual thing is worth. So it is another trick that's used. Now, this does happen again in non-free-to-play games as well, and you kind of want to do it in non-free-to-play games to to stop players worrying about their time. So it's how much is it worth in time? This is the important bit. So you want players to try and find ways to maximize their engagement. So you want them to be playing the game, but you don't want them to be worrying about how much it's worth in time. So you provide options within the game for them to, do a high risk mission, or maybe do a fetch quest or something they wouldn't usually do, but it does create more in-game time. Now, again, I'm not saying the ethics of this behavior, but this is what is done in order to artificially lengthen gameplay. There's 2 types, by the way, of goods you can put into your game. There is investment and non-investment. And non-investment essentially means this good doesn't give you anything. It's anything mechanical within the game. So on the left and on the right, like these are both 2 games that are not really free to play. Like on the left is RS6, it's cheap, but it's not free to play. League is free to play. And you'll see like the one on the left, the way they make their money is by selling operators. They sell a load of other things, but operators have different abilities and different mechanics in the way they play, and therefore can interact with other operators in your team in different ways. So that is an investment. If you purchase one, you're like, I want to buy specifically, I don't know, being able to blow open a wall, as opposed to the normal way where I wouldn't be able to. So that would be an investment. You're creating a mechanical difference by purchasing something. Non-investment is on the right, where it's just cosmetics, essentially. Cosmetics, little things that look pretty, that maybe show players what you are. Like, they don't mechanically affect anything. There's a small social effect, as in players may respect you more, players may be more friendly to you depending on the type of skin you choose, but it's negligible in the long-term thing. It's like mechanically doesn't have any effect. Both of these, a combination of both of these are important. Again, even in a single player game, people will still invest in cosmetics. There's an example I always use all the way back from Skyrim, which is like ancient. But in Skyrim, North American players will play in first person. A Oceania region, so like Asia and like Russia, will play in third person because they want to see the character, and therefore they'll also collect items that link in to a third player point of view. Whereas in the first person point of view, a lot of players will just put whatever is the best stat item to together, as opposed to trying to make a nice looking set. So this is an interesting model that is currently in vogue, and probably will be for a little while, both in single player and free to play. So gacha model, if anyone doesn't know what it came from, it's this. I'm sure people have heard of gacha model before, but it came from these machines where you put in a bit of cash, usually quite cheap, and what you get, you don't know. It's randomized. They're like little eggs, and they have little things in them, usually little plastic toys, and you don't know what you get because it's all you can't see what the next egg is going to be. That they also had rarities. So what they would do is they would have, shinies or like a special edition of which there would be one in every like entire filling of egg, which might be like 200 of them in there, 150. So one of them existed, but you don't know if you were going to get it. And then basically this got more and more complicated. So that's how it started off. It was just rarities. And it started to get even more complicated where they would be like, we guarantee there are one of this type in this and two of this type in this. So we'd fill them exactly to a certain number. And it got even more complicated where you would have to collect a bunch of different low-level ones, trade them up for a higher level one. And going on from that, then you would have to trade the higher level one with lower level ones for an even higher level one. And this was all physical. And basically all of this got brought into games. There was a very controversial one. Very controversial system. Like you can see that here, sorry. So like item A plus item B plus item C plus item D. You need all of these in order to get like a set that would give you a grand prize. And often each of these lower level items would also need even lower level items to be collected to trade in for that item B, let's say. So a lot of this got brought into games because if anyone looks at this, what is happening? You are continuously rewarding players, but you're also kind of dangling a big prize at the end of it. But on the way, you're rewarding them with little prizes and medium prizes, so they're always constantly being engaged to push forwards. Now again, you can take this a bad way and completely try and abuse this kind of like collection drive that humans have, or you can use it hopefully in a nice way to just drive engagement. So now I'm going to talk specifically about free-to-play itself. I have a bunch of good links in here that I would highly recommend everyone read, whether or not you care about free-to-play, because they do have interesting methods of player engagement. So in free-to-play, and this is very similar to premium games, in free-to-play, the first 10 minutes determines your lifetime. So the amount of players that you have, and this is very interesting, and a lot of companies will use this number as a way to attract publishers. X amount of players out of Y total players will determine for your entire lifetime of your game how much revenue you're going to make. You can kind of project it. So if your game, after the first 10 minutes, 70% of your players are still there, that's an unbelievable metric. That's very good. Now, premium is completely different. Premium is only first to 5 minutes. People are way less forgiving of premium games. Anyone know why?
Because they spent money on the game.
And what does that mean?
It means you think it's more worth it. You actually paid for a good product instead of just getting it for free.
So then why am I less forgiving about it if I think it's more worth it? Why
Because
do I give it?
you spent your money that you worked for, and you expect a higher quality product for a higher price.
Exactly. So I'm like, this is not living up to my expectations within the first 2 to 5 minutes, gone. Whereas free to play, I'm like, well, it's free. Look, I didn't pay anything for it. Whatever, give them a chance. And that's kind of the way it seems to be that people react. Now, I will say one thing. I do think we're seeing a shift in the free to play market. I think we're seeing players start to be more savvy and realize they're being used as milking machines and kind of being a lot more careful about how they're picking games. So this number may change very quickly. It may change within the next year or 2 years. At the moment, though, this number still stays the same. So as it says down to the bottom, free-to-play retention metrics are day, week, month. Now, if anyone ever goes to a free-to-play job, you'll need to know these kind of words. They're called KPIs, key performance indicators. You'll need to know the term metrics. Metrics are just your metrics. You need to know the terms acquisition, which is often called CPU, which is cost per user. So how much does it cost me in terms of marketing, in terms of like onboarding, how much does it cost me to get a user? Retention is how much does it cost me to keep a player and how many players are still in the game. And then monetization is like how much money am I making from those players. Has anyone heard the terms? I don't know if anyone's heard the terms whales, dolphins, and so if you're in the free-to-play market, it's quite simple. This comes from gambling days, which shows you how bad it is. Um, your actual player base is just your player base. That's how many players you have concurrently. Your dolphins are the ones who spend money every month, every week, like maybe once or twice a year. Your whales are the ones who are about 2%, 1 to 2% of your player base, but they generate about 80% of the revenue, 80 to 90% of the revenue. So this is the major problem we have with free to play at the moment. That developers will design for the whales, because the whales are the ones with loads of cash, and obviously they are the ones keeping the company alive. The second problem is, though, the whales are not going to be there if your player base, sorry, is not there. So if I don't have 1 million people playing, I, as a person with 1 million to spend, I'm like, I don't want to play this game. There's no one to play against. There's no one to beat, so I'm not going to do it. So there's this balancing act that needs to be done. There's also a term, and this decomposition term is very much related to your retention. So how many people you can keep. And this is like walls of patience is the term they call it. So essentially how long players wait before receiving new content. So as I said, even though this is free to play, this exact thing applies in actual games. How long will players wait before they receive new content in your single player game as well? It's the same exact thing. And it almost always ties back to time. It says currency here, but what is currency except a unit expression of the time you've put in? So almost everything is tied into time. That's why in the first 2 to 5 minutes of your game, you smash new players with loads of content. You give them loads of foreshadowing. You tell them what's going to happen in the future. You may not give it to them, but you'll tell them, look, trust me. If you can keep going with me, you can unlock XYZ. You'll be able to see this place if you can just stay with me for another 2-3 hours of your time. So these metrics are important, very much important for free to play, but they're also important for premium games. So first time user, you calculate every second. Every second the player gets something. Now, it can be something small. It can be like a little coin, whatever it is. But every second you give them it. Then you give it to them every hour. You need to have a big chunk every hour, and then first week every day for the first week. So if you drill that down into a single player game, the same concept applies. When they launch a game, every second they get something, they can see after the first day of gameplay, which is around, let's say, it wouldn't be a full actual day of gameplay, like 4 to 5 hours. What am I going to get? And I know that I'm going to get something every hour of that day. Now, this is, again, in an economy, the relationship between, as you can see, income almost always, it's either linear or exponential. This is like slightly exponential, just a little curve. Anyone kind of want to venture why the income that you get is always linear or exponential? It should never be inverse exponential.
The more players, then the more reward, and the higher the level, then the more money or resource you'd need to spend on getting something.
So kind of like the income doesn't matter what game you play. In-game currency almost always is a representation of time and mastery. So the more money you have, generally it shows the better you are, or at least the longer you've played the game. So you often want to have the curve at least linear, or most of the time it's actually exponential. in order for the player to feel better every time you go up a level, and you'll often see this in JRPGs or any RPG, it's much more obvious, where you know the amount of XP you need to go up another level. Every level you go up, the amount of XP you need is way higher, but conversely, the amount of XP you get for doing missions or for defeating enemies is also massively higher. And it's just a kind of like internal check for players to be, oh, I'm doing much better than I was. Like, every hit I do now, I'm doing 25,000 XP. When I first started this game, I was doing 2.5. And having that relationship difference, especially when it's so huge, that it's ridiculously huge, it really contributes to this sense of satisfaction in players that they know they're doing much, much better than they were before. It's the same as everything in real life. Like, most people want to be in a better place after having invested time and effort into whatever. They want to be in a better place, um, and they want to see a very numerical representation of how much better they are at this time than they were, let's say, 2 days ago. Now, also, you'll see the little kind of wiggle, and this little wiggle is the cost of items that you'll get. So obviously, a lot of items are gated at higher levels, so they're really expensive. But you'll often allow some items at higher levels to be much cheaper relative to the income that the player gets, and some to be much higher. And this looks very much like the difficulty curve we're talking about. So you'll often hear people saying games are like loops within loops, and this is another example of that. Even the economy is playing a difficulty curve trick on players. So the player knows they want to just keep trying to get as much cash as possible. That's normal. However, at each point, they can spend it on things. Some things are very easy to spend on, so I get like very quick gratification and very happy. But there are some things that I still can't get until I work like quite a bit more, and then I can afford it. And this drives me as a player. This kind of makes me go, okay, well, I could afford all this stuff at level 10, but the highest level 10 item, I can't afford it just yet. But I want to complete the set. I want to finish it off. I want to get all the level 10 items. And so this pushes me to keep going. And this is just another example. What I was talking for before. You'll often see, and this is for XP, you can see like from level 1 to like 50, the amount of XP you get is not even that huge. But as you get up here, it skyrockets. This is for... This is for an actual game, but I actually can't remember which game this is for. Sorry. But this was taken from an actual in-game skill progression, which is
Is
crazy.
it RuneScape?
Yes, thank you. I don't know why I didn't save in my notes, but you're exactly right. This is a RuneScape progression level, which is ridiculous. Like, so when you get up to here, it's essentially, if I meet a player, a 99 level player, not only do I know they've paid loads of work into this game, but I am impressed of, I kind of go like, oh wow, someone actually got it to 99. So you kind of want that, and it's sort of a soft gating mechanism as well to stop everyone in your game being level 99. Nice one for that, Sergi. Now, the nice thing about economies, now we're going to look at the nice stuff, it also allows for this storytelling. So if anyone doesn't follow Eve, or at least just read like gaming websites, Eve is essentially spreadsheet simulator in space. It's not mostly about space battle. It's about like generating resources, having alliances, etc., etc. But it allows for loads of stories to happen based around these resources. So just 13th of March, it's only a few days ago, 1,600 euros, that's this ship right here. This was carrying 1,600 euros of items and was just completely wiped off because one person was stupidly transporting it and wasn't paying attention, got jumped, and got everything wiped. It made the news because it was a revenge kind of like attack, and people tried to tease out the different stories behind it. In September 11, 2017, there's a very interesting, it actually is, it plays out like kind of spy thriller story. If anyone's interested, I highly recommend going and reading it. It's this one here, the how Eve players pulled the biggest betrayal in history. This involved two huge factions involving hundreds of thousands of real life dollars, and hundreds of thousands of hours of work put into the game, essentially being nicked from one of the largest factions and turned over to a different faction because they had a sleeper agent who had worked their way up the ranks, took the keys and turned them over. There's a massive fight. It caused loads of factions to go into war together. And remember, this is all in-game silly stuff, this is not real life, but people get invested in it because their time is pushed in it. Now, all these stories of people literally meeting in real life in secret meetings, covering their faces, it again, like a spy thriller, all of this was simply driven by an economy. Everything is tied to ISK in game, so even the amount of time, the amount of money you pay to have a subscription to Eve is in the form of ISK. So everything is in that ISK currency, and it represents essentially players' time. So players get invested, which allows them to basically meta the game in ways that you wouldn't expect. So we already covered this before, why one should disincentivize hoarding. And a lot of things are done by artificial limitation, that you can't get more of a certain thing. There's a very famous case in the past where a company did not put in hoarding prevention, and what happened is players were able to exploit the game. I mean, they were playing fully within the game. They weren't cheating. They were able to exploit the game to run away and get billions and billions of in-game currency. What then happened is those players had an unbelievable advantage over other lower players, and the MMO was kind of screwed. They didn't know what to do. So I'm not sure if I've said this to you before, but if anyone remembers, the way they solved it is they turned all of that currency into diamonds, which had a finite time life, and then they changed the actual in-game currency to a different type of currency. So it allowed the players who had hoarded loads of it to still be kind of happy because they had loads of the diamonds, but it also didn't completely wreck the newer players. So finally, this was what I was going to get you to do. You're going to create imbalance in economy for a battling MMO, and you're going to set it up in a Google Sheets. I'm going to show you an example here. This is an example from Galaxy of Heroes from Star Wars, and you can see it's all based on probabilities. So they have a thing called character shards, but they have a currency as well, and everything is based off shards. So all shards are the basic number, but they also have blueprint drops. So the blueprint drops are dependent on probability, but you can also buy them, and the cost is linked to the shards, as you can see. And you can see that it gets real complicated really fast. I will have this in a link for people to read. I was going to ask you to design a very simple economy, and essentially we would have a sort of in-class trading system, but we can't do that. So instead, I'm going to put this link into Discord. And this is a really simple, really simple assignment for you to do. I just want you to play this game, that's all. And this game is called Slipways. It's on itch.io. It's a little complicated. I highly recommend playing with Forgiving. And essentially what you do is you're trying to create an economy with different planets. Now what I like about this game is everything, you see the way it's 100? So everything's based on very small numerical details, but you can see how it gets very complicated very quickly simply by just adding more items into it. And you can see how you incentivize players to create economy engines. And in this case, my incentivization is very simple. It's just get more money. Now, in this case, they've chosen to make get happiness equals more money, but really that relationship can be anything you want. So this game is incentivizing me to spread out. It's incentivizing me to make happy planets, but by doing so, I do have to subjugate other planets. Any questions?
Is this an assignment?
No. So, as I said, I'm not giving you any other assignments. Everything is just going to be based on your second game. This is all stuff that
Okay.
they suggest you should do for your own growth. Like,
Yeah.
assignments are fine to pass second year, but when you go out into the workforce, the employers are not going to be like, "Oh, how well did you do in second year?" So,
Yeah.
it's more for your own growth. Um, if anyone wants to do the actual assignment I was going to do in class, which would have formed part of your portfolio, I do think it is a very interesting one. Some designers do. Let me just bring it up again. Some companies will ask you how, whether you have examples of economy balancing. Come on, game balance catch. And having at least one example of balancing an economy or balancing a system is very important. Now, like you will have some from balancing systems from John's class as well. So this was going to be you're going to create a battling MMO economy, or at least the bare bones of one. Again, this is not a graded assignment. I do highly recommend it though.
Is this individual or in a group?
This was supposed to be in a group, but there's no way we're going to do it in a group now. So it's going to have to be individual, which is why it was really hard. Like this is a pretty difficult assignment. Like this is going to be in class, all of you working together. It is tough. I don't know if anyone's tried to design an economy before. It is difficult, really difficult. So I do recommend doing it if you have the time, but be aware it is very difficult. Even just try to do it, like give it a shot, and just by doing so, you'll understand kind of like quite a lot more about economy design, how much X should cost, how much Y should cost. That game, though, definitely play that game. Okay, so that's it for me blabbing at you. For next week, what I'm going to try and do, so that was supposed to be, am I right? Was that supposed to be our alpha? Yes, it was. So
Okay.
next week was supposed to be alpha. What I would like everyone to do for next week is have the alpha builds as playable builds on itch. So that means not having to go into and download it. I can play it
Yeah.
as a WebGL build. And what I'll ask everyone to do is put them all into a testing channel. Don't worry about it until next week. And I'll try and get as many people from other years to play the games and give you playtest feedback as possible.
Okay.
Okay.
Temtem is a good one to look at. If you, I'd say the Temtem economy is probably listed online.
You'd be able to find like a lot of that stuff in their Discord server as well that like anybody can join.
Temtem economy.
Oh, Temtem! Isn't that the cute cat thing from Undertale?
No, it's the fake Pokemon game.
That's Temmie.
I'd say like a lot of their economy right now, because it's like still in early access, is
Wait.
like going on in the Discord because people are like trading through that. So
I'd say the economy is quite complex as well, is it? It seems to be very.
Yeah, they do. So like, and again, same on their Discord. Like they have a lot of different channels that like they just leave for anybody to look at because they're like trying to get like feedback as well to change things.
Let me just see if I can launch it here quickly. So where would I look? Oh, there's a little trading hub. Want to trade?
Yeah, there'd probably be stuff like that. There's like specifically a lot of trading like looking for shinies. Like people will pay like a